Hi class, today we are going to cover chapter 6 and chapter 7 of this class. Chapter 6 we are talking about functions. When you're creating programs, a lot of times you want to break down your main function into smaller pieces, and then those smaller sections, modules we create, we call functions. So the benefit of the functions, we can reuse it. Those functions is modules. So for example, if you put the function calculate average, every time your program is doing calculation of the average, instead of rewriting the code, you can actually just call the functions. And then those functions are usually created after the main. Main is a function as well. So outside the main function, you create separate functions. And when you're ready to use those functions, you just make the function code. It's pretty easy, plain and simple. Okay. A function is the module that returns the value back to the part of the program that codes it. So usually we call the function in the main functions, and then after the function finish the task, they will return a certain value back to the where the function code was made. All right. So the main language that provide library of the function that you can use, like a random number generators, calculate square roots of something, calculate the absolute value of something. So all those functions, a lot of functions already come with standard library for the current setting of the programs. Okay, those library functions, they are writing functions that come with the most of language. Usually the common tasks, especially those mathematical related, a lot of time because they are so high frequently used, so they have to include it in the programs. Okay. For example, random generated functions, what you can think of is the first thing, game programming, simulations, especially a lot of statisticals as well, security, subset encryptions. Every hour depends on how secure you need. By every day, every 2 weeks, every something, they random generate the code, and they can embed it into encrypt the certain securities. So usually when we are introduced random number generator, the assignment I usually give my programming class will be like a lottery programs. So you can create a little program, generate 5-6 different numbers, and play with your families. That'll be pretty nice. Okay. So the function normally in the random number generator function will look something like this. It's pretty simple. You see, set the number equal random. Here is the function, and they give it a range, the minimum range and the maximum range. So this one shows you the random function will random generate a number between 1 to 100. So they can every time they generate different numbers. So like those random number function, it's already come with library for you to use, so you don't need to recreate it. It's pretty useful. So when you try to create your own functions, there are a few things you need to include in your function. First of all is the headers. Okay, header come with the information of your function, the name of your function. Usually when we create a name of your function, we make the name is more descriptive, more meaningful. So by reading the names of the header, you know what this function gonna do, like a average number or standard deviations, like the random numbers. Those names, they make sense to you. Okay, the headers, and also followed by the header, you're gonna come with the parentheses. Inside a parenthesis, we call it parameters. What it does is, whenever you call a function, if you need to pass the data into the function for them to manipulate the data, or need to create a result, that's the path. The function call, pass the data to the parameter, and then the function can do the task. Okay, that all come with the headers. And after header is the body. Of course, all the coding for your function will be inside. Okay. And then the next is the return statements. Once you finish the coding, finish the work, your function has to return to where you make the function calls. Okay, some of the function they do return value, some of them don't. Just depends on the task you need to do for the functions. So for example here, you do a function. Okay, here function integer. You can see here the function, the name is called integer. The return type is the integer, and the name is sum. So what it does is summing up the numbers. Okay, so inside the parenthesis you see the integer num1, integer num2. So based on looking at the header, I know this function you're gonna add the number together. How many number they come with number 1 and number 2. So in here you see they create local variable results, and the result equal to num1 plus num2, and at end return the results. So this is a function here. It does sum, adding 2 numbers. So if we go back to the main function here, okay, ask a user to enter your age, get a first number, and ask your best friend's age, enter his number. So now they call the function sum and 2 parameters. Remember, first age and second age. This function will add these 2 numbers and return it to the local main function here. The number will save into the total here, and then they will display total. So you see they put a 22 at first and 24. They added together, return 46. Okay, that's a simple function code right there. And the additional concern, when you try to create a function, you can pass as many as argument into the function. Okay, when we're making a function call, all the data we pass into the function is called arguments. When we create a function, all those parameters we create inside the parentheses, the one receiving those arguments data. Okay, so when you create a function, we have an IPO chart here. Okay, the input, what data coming, what kind of process you need to do, and what kind of output you want to see. Okay, just depends. Those are the IPO chart to help you to design the functions. So you can create this chart before, write down what kind of output you need, what kind of input you need, and write down what kind of process you need to do for the function to work correctly. Those IPO charts. Okay. There's a lot of library function come with it. Most of the time we're using those library come from math. Okay. So in this example, you see the result equal to square root of 16. The result will equal to what? 4. And the power function 4 to the power 2, which will be 16. So you see all those functions, you don't need to recreate yourself. Those mathematics class already come with library. So you just need to know what the function name is and what kind of parameter it's taking, and then you can use the functions. All right. And the other common ones you can see here, the ABS, it's the absolute value, cosines, okay, and the wrong numbers, wrong it to the nearest integers, okay, and then sine and the tangents. Those are all mathematic functions we normally used, okay. And some other functions, data type conversions. Okay, a lot of time, like I said, when your program reading a data from the keyboard, from the user typing on the keyboard, they usually read as a strings, but you cannot calculate strings, right? So sometimes all the string you need to convert to the numerical numbers. So those are the conversion data type. You can convert it to integers. You can convert it to real numbers, just depends on the decimal points. Okay, all those functions already comes library as well. You just need to know how to call the functions. So here, and every time when you try to converting, just depends. If you today converting the real number into the integer, you're gonna lose the decimal points. Okay. But if the two integer, you're gonna convert it to the real number. There's no problems. Okay. So, and they have certain things, certain formatting functions as well, like especially the currencies. Okay, currency functions. What it does is it display the amount you put in. You see the number. If you have a real amount like this, 6450.879. If you today format is currency, what it does is it will add the money sign in the front, put the thousands commas, and round it the 2-digit decimals only. So that's a currency data type. Okay, so that's a special function called currency formats. It comes with different languages as well. Okay, and also they have a different function we use a lot, the string. We mentioned it before, the length of the strings. Okay, that gives you how many characters come with these strings. That function already comes with append. If today you have a string, you want to add more words after it to the sentence, the append function does that for you. To upper, to lower, uppercase, lowercase, those does. Substrings, they find among, if you have a whole sentence, you want to looking for a certain phase, you will be able to extract it out as well. Okay, and string that contains on certain wording, they contain certain characters, and you can convert a string to integer to real, like we mentioned it. If they are numerical type, to do the calculation, you need to convert it. Okay, and you can even testing it if it's an integer or it's reals. So all those, they can test it out. They return it true or false. Okay. So that's the chapter 6 of the functions. All right. And the next one we're gonna mention is chapter 7. Chapter 7 is the short chapters. Okay, that comes with when you start doing a lot of programming, getting the data from users. We need to do the input validations. Okay, input validations to make sure the data is correct. All right. If program reads the bad data as input, you're gonna come out with the bad outputs. Okay, if you don't have a right input, the result, of course, is not good. Especially, like for example, if you are doing the gradebook programs, if the input is negative number or something way over hundreds, that's gonna make your whole data set inaccurate. Okay, so make sure your data needs to be correct. So we need to do input validations. Okay, and if we see the data is invalid, we need to reject it or ask a user to re-enter the correct data. Accident happens, so that's something we need to be careful of. So anything you read, any program you write, if you deal with the data input from the user, even from file or anything, you need to do the input validations. Like for example here, like these examples, they're gonna ask you how many hours you worked, what's your pay rate, and they calculate your gross pay. You see here, enter the number of hours work, 400. Enter the hourly pay rate, 220. And this person gonna get paid $8,000 a week. Is that possible? Or even let's say a month. Is that possible? We do 40 hours a week, right? Even it's 4 weeks, it's 160 hours. And this person worked 400 hours. Does that make sense? Probably not. So you need to, and also if it's overtime, the calculation will be different as well. So that input validation you need to check. Okay. And the input validation is like this. It's the loop. The loop you learn, like a while loop. The while loop, we can check the condition, right? Or do while loop as well. They check the condition. Get the input, check whatever condition. If x is less than 40, or x is less than 65, or something, any type of input validation. If it's invalid, true, and you're gonna send a message to the screen and ask a user to input the data again. Okay, and when that happens, once they re-enter, you need to run through the condition again to check. So that's a loop to force the user to re-enter until the data is in the right range or the right data is entered. Input validation using the loop. Okay. The primary is the first input to be tasted. So you see, please enter the test score. When they enter, if the score less than 0 or greater than 100, like I said, the grade is supposed to be between 0 and 100, right? If it's like this, less than and greater than, it's showing the grade cannot be less than 0 or greater than 100, enter the correct one. So make sure here this is the line, input score. Every time if you're using a loop to do the input validation, the most important part, you need to let the user re-enter the input again. If you miss this part, what happened? It's gonna turn into an infinite loop because there's never been updated. They're always gonna be the wrong data. That's gonna be infinite loop until you shut down the programs. Okay, every time you do input validation, make sure you let the user update the inputs. Okay, and the writing input validation function, if your program the data they're dealing with is usually around the same type of data, the range, you can do, instead of every section of the input you do the validation, you can create a function separately. Every time you want to check, just pass the data into the function, they check and turn it back to true or false for you. Okay, same thing, validation, the string validation. A lot of time you write a program, they ask you, do you want to continue, yes or no, right? So when you are looking for specific string, you need to be careful because sometimes you ask it yes, or sometimes they just enter Y as a characters. So the full spelling yes or the single characters, that's something you need to be careful when you're doing input validations. And defensive programming, input validation is different, you protect your program before you crash, before you give you bad data. So it's always a good thing for you to have input validations. What kind of error you can have, empty input when user accidentally hit enter twice instead of enter data. That happens quite a bit. All right, or they enter the wrong data type. They're looking for how old are you. You put ABCs. Okay, those need to be tested the data before you move on. Common errors like for you enter the state when I don't know, I need to put a Texas, spell out a Texas or TX. So that's something you need to verify, and the zip code, 5-digit, or those extra 4. I never remember the extra 4 after. Okay, so the hourly wage possible, and how many hours they can work in a certain amount of time. That's something you need to check. Okay. Yeah, that's the idea of input validation. It's a short chapter. That's it for today's lecture. If you have any question, please let me know. Email me or call me or stop by my office hour. All right. You guys have a good week.